Hello there YouTube, Devin here again. Today we are sitting at my workbench, which is also my kitchen table. Unfortunately, you can see some of my cool stuff here in the background. Winter and rain gear and CAD-PAT. Two of my 5 sewing machines I use for my sewing projects and leather crafting and stuff like that. Other various little bits and bobs, and then I got the Ross Mark III here on the table for you today because we're gonna go over a video that I haven't seen on YouTube, and I don't think I've seen it anywhere else either. I have read about it, like you can read about how to disassemble one of these, but I figured I'd show it to you guys on video, so that way anyone who has one of these could safely disassemble one of these. You don't need to worry about breaking anything then, or losing parts, or wondering how this all goes back together. I also didn't show you what the ammo for the Ross Mark III looks like, so I got some stuff to compare it here to. So this is what the Ross shoots. It is a 303 British round. It is a rimmed round, as you can see there. I really like rimmed ammo, even though it's kind of widely out of date. Pretty much standard for the day as far as power goes. And this is a Mosin Nagant round to compare it to. Set that down right there. So right here is the 303. Next to it is the 762x54 rimmed, and then next to that we have a 308 or 762x51 NATO. So I hope that gives you a good comparison of what it is. So my lighting isn't super great right now over my workbench because I have just the track lights on, and this is kind of the dimmer of the 2 track lights. So unfortunately, you kind of have to bear with me. But that is what the ammo looks like. So this is what it would shoot. It is the same height as a 762x54 rimmed. It's just a little bit longer and narrower case, whereas the 762x54 rimmed is kind of a shorter, fatter case. So we'll get that out of the way, and then we'll get into how to disassemble the Ross so you can check it for pitting and for rust, and do preventive maintenance and stuff like that on it. What you're going to need to take this apart is basically a flathead screwdriver. I have 2 sets of flathead screwdrivers, actually, one wider and one kind of narrower, because I don't want to mark up the screws, and some of the screws require a wider screwdriver, whereas some require a narrower screwdriver. So the first thing we're going to do with the Ross here is we're going to remove the bolt. And for those of you who don't know how to do that, we're going to show you. So right here, if I can get it all lined up good. So if you flip up the rear sight, there's a little lever, kind of like a 1903. It actually comes apart exactly like a 1903. It's also your magazine cutoff. There's this lever here. If I can steady it a little more and get it a little closer to the camera here for you. God, this thing had to be like 50 inches long. All right, so as you can see here, there is this lever. Here, I'll get another light on so we can see better. Is it any better? Not really. All right, we'll try this. We'll roll with this. So, all right, yeah, that is much better, much better. All right, so as you see here, there's this lever right alongside the rear sight on the left hand side of the rifle. And so up would be full access to magazine. Down all the way would be single feed, so your magazine cut off. But there's, just like on 1903, there is a middle position, and that is what you need to have it set for to remove the bolt. So we will now switch the bolt to fire, okay? And if I can do this without getting it in the way. Alright, so remove the bolt. So the bolt should just slide out of the back of the gun, and then the bolt head will rotate much like an M95. because it's basically the same bolt design. So don't let it bite you. If you get your fingers pinched between the bolt sleeve there and the bolt, it hurts. It hurts pretty bad, just letting you know. So, but that is how you remove the bolt on a Ross rifle. Now, the Ross is basically only held together with 4 screws as far as the action and stock goes. So we will start with removing those. Alright, so the first screw we're going to take out is up here, holding in the front sight. As you can see right there, it's a little tiny flathead screw. Not the front sight, sorry, the front barrel brand, and it also has the bayonet lug on it and the stacking swivel. So we're just going to unscrew that. You don't need to unscrew it very far. This goes all the way through the stock. So there you go. Screw removed. And now we're just going to kind of slide that up. It will not fit over the front sight with the front sight hood on, but you don't need to remove it really in order to get the stock off. The next screw we're going to remove here is right on the bottom of the second barrel band. Right, you can kind of see it right there. Another tiny little flathead screw right behind the sling swivel. So gonna unscrew that one. This one takes a little bit more to unscrew than the front one, but not by much. There you go, a little shorter screw. And then you can slide that forward. And now we can remove the upper handguard, which, as with most rifles of this era, is held in place with spring clips. So there you go, upper handguard removed. Right. And now we're going to remove the floor plate and the action trigger assembly, barrel, chamber. All of that is held in place with 2 screws, as with most surplus rifles. So the one here is at the front of the floor plate, and the other one we need to remove is right here behind in the bolt raceway. So we got to remove both of those. So we'll start with the one here on the bottom. Now these ones are larger, so I'm going to use the larger screwdriver for that. Now these ones have kind of longer threads too, so just be mindful. It might seem like you're unscrewing for forever. You're not hurting it. Just keep going. Eventually it'll pop free. Alright, so there's a shorter, kind of fatter screw. And then we'll flip it over and do the same thing to this one here in the bolt raceway. Alright, now the Ross kind of comes apart a little weird compared to a lot of surplus rifles. So, large screw there. Now, in order to remove the magazine and stuff, because it doesn't have a removable magazine, what you got to do is you got to remove the floor plate and trigger guard. It slides over the magazine, so there's that Ross floor plate and trigger guard. Set that off to the side. The magazine does not come out the bottom of the gun, unfortunately. It has to come out through the top of the stock. So now we're going to slide our second barrel band up kind of as far as it will go. And then we're going to work our barrel and everything kind of free here. Perfect. So there is our stock, chamber, everything, barrel band, assembly, all that right there. So now we have just the bottom stock and the magazine. Now the bottom stock will have a little inlet right there, as you can see. That is where that second barrel band will screw into. It doesn't really come out. It's kind of tapped in place like with metal. And then if you rotate the rifle entirely upside down, your magazine will fall out. And this is your magazine here. So it's kind of a reminiscent of a slab-sided kind of magazine for an AK. It has a follower that works at a very aggressive angle The feed lips on this thing are actually removable parts. As you can see here, they're just held in place with little clamps. So it's just a kind of bent piece of steel that these two kind of feed lips have. And then it runs down, and then the last little bit kind of tucks into a little cut here in the magazine. This last little bit is bent over to keep it from sliding up and down. But it works on instead of a flat spring, it has a coil spring wrapped around a rod in there. So the follower kind of comes down at an angle like this. So it kind of curves down rather than coming straight down like most magazines would in the follower. It's very, 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 very complicated. And as you can see here, here is the front of the magazine. It's kind of bigger tray, and it has these little kind of wings. And these little wings here are actually how it sits in the stock and keeps it aligned. That's the only thing that does it. It's not actually connected in any positive way to the receiver and trigger assembly and barrel and chamber. It's not connected in any positive way to any of that. It's just held in place by the stock, which is also kind of weird. The fact that it barely even touches, to be honest, inside the stock. So very finely made though, and it works quite well. It does rim jam. This magazine will rim jam very easily, unfortunately. So you got to make sure that you have all of your ammo lined up the way it's supposed to be. So, which pretty much sucks, because how you're supposed to standard load British chargers, as they're known to my friends in the UK, but to the rest of the world they're known as stripper clips. How you would load a stripper clip is you load so it's 5 rounds, and 1, 3, and 5 are down against the clip, and 2 and 4 sit up on the rims of the other ammo, so it kind of alternates in this kind of weird step pattern. These don't like that. These Ross magazines don't like that very much, so you need to load them all the other way, where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where each of the rounds towards the top rim is in front of the rim of the cartridge behind it, or otherwise this mag will rim jam. Which is, I believe, where a lot of the problems with rim jams come along, where like the myth kind of started, because most Lee Enfield magazines are very hard to rim jam. Pattern 14 magazines are very, very hard to rim jam. Even a lot of Mosin and Nagant magazines are very, very hard to rim jam. I think this is the magazine that kind of perpetuated rim jams as far as World War I goes. So I think this is the magazine where a lot of the myths come from. But that is your fully disassembled Ross. So now you guys know how to do that, how to take it apart to where you could check the wood, make sure your wood is in very, very good condition, make sure that all your parts are nicely oiled and there isn't any corrosion or anything on them. Everything should be very finely fitted and very, very nice. And make sure you do your preventive maintenance. So now you guys know, if you have a Ross rifle, how to take it apart and everything like that, and how you just do everything in reverse. So now to put it back together. So to put it back together, the first thing we're going to do is take the magazine, make sure it's the correct way, and drop it into the stock. All right. And then we're going to take our chamber, barrel assembly, trigger assembly, all that other good stuff, and make sure that that is all now in place and that everything's going to fit together well. So we'll make sure our barrel bands and everything are all lined up the way they're supposed to slide over the stock here in the front. And then we will line up our trigger assembly with its correct hole and position in the action. Alright, got that all lined up, pops right against the magazine. Then we will take the floor plate and install that over the magazine. Alright, make sure everything gets nice and snug together in the position it's supposed to be in. We'll take our large screw that goes in the raceway, screw that into place here. So you want to make sure while you're doing this too that you don't over tighten your screws. If you over tighten your screws or anything along that lines, it's going to possibly for one damage your screws. And a lot of these rifles are very hard to find replacement parts for, just so you know. So you just want it snug. You don't want to like wrench it down real hard. That's something that I find a lot on surplus rifles. People wrench down too hard on the parts of them, and that's how you get problems. So, and make sure you're using the appropriate size tools. If you have to, I'm not going to tell you not to bang on a surplus rifle, because sometimes in order to get it apart, to make sure it's safe to shoot, you do need to bang on a surplus rifle. So it'd be nice to make sure you have like a wooden dowel. They're pretty cheap to get, or a brass drift for smaller parts, because brass is softer than steel. It shouldn't hurt your rifle. Wood is obviously softer than steel. It shouldn't hurt your rifle. So if you do have to bang on anything, and then make sure you aren't using like a steel hammer. Get like a nice rawhide mallet to tap parts that need to be tapped, so you don't end up damaging your rifle in any way. Especially don't scrape off the finish. Finish is a very important piece of maintaining a weapon. So make sure that your finish stays nice on especially the metal and the wood. A lot of these rifles are very hard to get stocks for now. So make sure you take care of your piece of gear, and you're using common sense when you're maintaining them. So that way we don't lose any more history to the ages or to people being dumb, because it unfortunately happens every day, which is why a lot of this stuff is getting more and more expensive. So use your common sense. You guys can feel free to leave me questions in the comments if you have any problems with your gun that you seem to have a problem. Obviously, if it's a major problem like pitting and corrosion, you need to take that to a gunsmith in order for it to be fixed. I'm not going to help you fix that. It's not the best way to handle that. The best way to prevent pitting and corrosion is obviously with your preventive maintenance, which means taking apart your rifle or handgun or really any other surplus firearm once a year and making sure there's no corrosion on it. So lightly oiling it, making sure it all works out just fine. Alright, so now we're going to reset the bolt. Now a lot of you guys who have an M95 will have been through this before. You want to make sure you have a nice hold on the bolt. And you want to pull out the bolt head and rotate it so that it is nice and even. And then you want to very carefully, because if you tap it, like the M95, some of these, if you breathe on them, the bolt will rotate out of position again. And then you want to make sure that you get it in the raceway, and you could drive it home, flip up your bolt catch again. Now, make sure that your bolt catch is in the good position, not because if you fire around, it'll still be fine and safe as long as your bolt is assembled correctly on these. But then when you go to pull the bolt back to like eject the round, the bolt will just come out of the back of the gun. You'll pull it right out of the back of your gun if it's set to the disassembly position. So just make sure you have it in either or, all the way down or all the way up. Don't have it in the middle position. And I'm not disassembling the bolt for you today because your bolt shouldn't need to be disassembled, because if there's nothing wrong with it. If you have something wrong with it, take it into a professional, or there's many other videos out there where you could learn to take it apart correctly and then reassemble it correctly. But please be safe and make sure you have everything assembled correctly. Now, for the Ross rifle, they are known to like not really explode, but people disassemble the bolts wrong, and you only get about 15 degrees of rotation of the bolt head rather than 90, which is where it will fly out of the back of the gun and possibly injure the shooter. This really wasn't a problem with the actual military, because it ended up not being able to be disassembled in the field. Soldiers were told that if you have a problem with your rifle, you take it to a field armorer, which is somebody who is specifically trained to take apart the bolt and check it and replace it if anything was damaged. You were not supposed to disassemble this in the field, which is why you don't hear stories of it, really, in the military. You really kind of start seeing this when they went onto the surplus market, and for some reason people are taking them apart when they don't know what to do, and that's how you get these problems. So, if your rifle works fine, you should, and you're not crawling around with it in the mud, if you're just a casual shooter like I am, you should have no reason to disassemble your bolt. It should be fine. You can get lubed to almost every part of the bolt by from the outside of the bolt. You shouldn't need to be taking it apart to service it or anything like that, unless you have some serious problems with carbon leaks or anything like that, because these are potentially hazardous. So thank you guys for stopping by with me. I haven't seen a Ross disassembled on YouTube. Hopefully the camera angles and everything all work out, and I did enough explaining for what you couldn't see, so you know how to take one of these apart, and safely anyways if you own one, because I haven't seen another video like this on YouTube, and these rifles are very, very nice shooters, and they deserve to be maintained and preserved for history. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.